Good afternoon and welcome to Illinois Extension's Commercial Ag webinar series. I'm Chelsea Harbach, your host for this webinar series. I'm a Commercial Ag Extension Educator with the University of Illinois stationed at the Research Center outside of Monmouth, Illinois in the western part of the state. This series is held every second and fourth Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. Be sure to follow our webpage for updates and details/registration for future webinars. We ask that you save your questions for the end of the webinar or submit questions via the chat box throughout the webinar. Also, please be sure that your mics are muted and your videos off to assist with bandwidth. You may use your mic to ask questions at the end if that is your preference. Today we welcome Phillip Alberti, one of our Commercial Ag Extension Educators with Illinois Extension, located in Northern Illinois. Today Phillip will talk to us about all things hemp. Here's Phillip.
Hello, welcome to the Commercial Ag webinar series. My name is Phillip Alberti and I am a Commercial Agriculture Educator with the University of Illinois Extension. Originally from southeastern Wisconsin, I received a bachelor's degree in molecular biology and botany from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Master of Plant Sciences from South Dakota State. I typically work in commercial crop production and my areas of focus include row crop and industrial hemp production. You can find my contact information at the bottom of the screen, and you are encouraged to reach out to me at any time. Today, I'm going to be talking about Illinois hemp, production strategies, and research updates. Let's get started. Today, I'm going to be covering the following topics: overview of the 2019 growing season, production systems, research updates, resources available, and opportunities to collaborate on research projects in 2020 and beyond. We have quite a bit of resources from both the public and private sectors that I'm excited to share with you today. There are a lot of topics to cover today and not a great deal of time, so I may move quickly through certain areas of the presentation. I will be pointing out hyperlinks to various educational material or videos expanding on the topics I will be covering. And all of these resources are available at our website, Go.Illinois.edu/hemp, and I would also like to point out links to our Grower Spotlight series at Go.Illinois.edu/spotlight. With that, let's get started. Cannabis plants can be classified as either industrial hemp or marijuana based on the THC concentration. If the THC concentration is above 0.3%, that cannabis plant is considered marijuana. If the THC concentration is below 0.3%, that plant is considered hemp. Cannabis can be grown for food, fiber, and flower depending on the production system and end product. Hemp is primarily dioecious, meaning that there are both male and female plants in a given field. However, the emergence of feminized varieties which contain primarily females dominate the market. Cannabis is primarily photoperiod dependent. However, there have also been the development of certain autoflower strains. There has been tremendous interest in hemp as a vital remediator of soils due to its ability to pull out pesticides and heavy metals from the soil. In 2019, there was a lot of interest across the state to grow industrial hemp, with over 20,000 acres registered to grow hemp, of which only about 17,000 acres were actually licensed. As stated, hemp can be grown for food, fiber, and flower, so there was a lot of curiosity as to how those acres were going to be delegated in terms of production. At the end of the growing season, we saw that only 5,200 acres were harvested. Based on the information here and from the map, we can see that nearly all of that production was for cannabinoids. 2019 was a very challenging growing season with both a wet spring and fall, which I believe had a significant impact on not only the acres that were planted, but those that were harvested as well. Hemp plants produce a wide variety of molecules of interest, including cannabinoids, such as CBD, THC, CBG, etc., and terpenes. As such, the production practices and harvest systems in place will have to reflect the final product: biomass for extraction or higher quality flower. It is critical to understand that these processes prior to cultivation of hemp in order to be successful. I will not touch on this too much, but a particular value in the smokable flower market is the terpenes produced by the plant. Terpenes are compounds associated with the smell of the plant material and in conjunction the effects that you feel. Many laboratories will be able to perform analysis to determine the amount and type of terpenes in your plant material and will be issued with the certificate of analysis as shown here. One thing I would recommend to growers considering growing hemp for the first time is to look at some of these pre-plant considerations. Understanding how you will harvest the material, how you will dry it, and where you are drying it are very important factors to consider. This is a high-value crop that can spoil easily, and there are things that should be planned before you even plant the hemp. The University of Kentucky has put together a great hemp enterprise budget, which is available on their website. This budget is easily manipulated to fit your needs for any production system. You are able to input market and input costs to accurately reflect your production system. In addition, the University of Tennessee at Knoxville has come up with a budget similar to that of the University of Kentucky. You can access that budget on our website as well. I have found that by combining these two budgets, it will give you a good idea of the input costs required to grow industrial hemp, although it will take some personal adjustments based on your production system, end product, and end market value. I think we've learned a lot in 2019 with regards to variety selection, and we're going to talk about some of the lessons we learned here. First things first, what is your intended use? Is it for smokable flower or for biomass for extraction, as that will have serious implications on your production system and harvesting strategies discussed later. What are your state and federal rules? Will this material be going for interstate commerce? What is your production system? Is this an indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, or a combination of both? All of these factors will influence your decision and should be considered when making variety selections. A point I would like to emphasize is again the fact that cannabis is often a photoperiod dependent crop, and so origin and conditions for breeding are also important to consider, for specific varieties will adapt to specific environmental profiles. For example, in the top image, a race of Cannabis sativa photoperiodically adapted to a longer southern season would come into flower very late when grown in a short northern season. In the bottom image, a race of Cannabis sativa photoperiodically adapted to a short northern season would come into flower very early when grown in a long southern season. This is similar to how soybeans would respond. As discussed previously, important terms to understand in cannabis would be the difference between dioecious and feminized varieties, where dioecious populations contain both male and female plants in approximately equal ratios. A feminized variety contains a vast majority of female plants. This is important as the development of dioecious production systems have recently emerged in the market. Dioecious production systems produce co-products such as grain and/or fiber, in addition to cannabinoids, and are planted at a much higher population than in the feminized system. These production systems are new and will require further study. For those of you interested in learning more about this type of production system, which may fit more conventional growers, you are encouraged to check out a production video that was done in collaboration with Purdue University, New West Genetics, Colorado State, Michigan State, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We have also seen the development of autoflower varieties, which will flower after a certain number of days instead of responding to photoperiod. However, most of the varieties on the market are what would be considered photoperiod dependent and may be commonly classified as full season varieties. When sourcing your seeds or transplants, it's important to understand that not all varieties are created equal. The market is currently saturated with varieties of the same name being sold by different companies. The reality is most of these plants are similar in only name alone. As illustrated from a study done out of Colorado with New West Genetics, we can see that there are two varieties of cherry blossom being sold by different competitors in this particular study. While their average THC levels are similar, as well as their days to flower, we see that there are substantial differences in production of CBD. While this is a small study, it illustrates a very important point that until seed certification can catch up to the industry, you have to be wary about your genetics. So how do you know if you're getting poor genetics? Well, it's really hard to tell, but here's some information which may be helpful to you. Rock River Laboratories out of Wisconsin took a look at some data from compliance testing in 2019 and shared their results. What they found is that in many cases, many of the varieties currently on the market, THC and CBD will increase both throughout the growing season and are directly proportional. This relationship allowed them to confidently estimate the amount of THC in a product given an amount of CBD. What is so interesting is that based on these results, the highest CBD concentration that a compliant crop could have attained is about 10.2%. They also noted that if THC concentration threshold was increased to 1%, CBD production of industrial hemp cultivars could significantly be improved. So what does this mean for you? Basically, if a COA sounds too good to be true, it likely is, and this provides you a great opportunity to call the laboratory to ensure that the COA is indeed valid. There have also been cases where the QR codes used to identify the certificate of analysis have been muddled, making them unidentifiable. That is also a red flag. If you were concerned regarding seed quality, here are some resources for you to look at pertaining to how to read a label on a bag of hemp seed. Laws, regulations, and considerations when buying hemp seed, and best management practices for hemp seed production. All of these resources from the American Seed Trade Association are available on our website at Go.Illinois.edu/hemp. Field selection is one of the most important factors in hemp production. Hemp likes light textured and well-drained soils. Given that there are currently no pesticides approved for industrial hemp production, planting in the field with a low history of weed pressure will be very important. Weed pressure and disease control have proven to be challenging aspects of production in Illinois, so cultural practices and prevention will be your best option. Lastly, I would like to draw attention to heavy metals. Hemp is a phytoremediator and will take up what is in the soil. Heavy metal contamination is difficult to remediate from crude oil and can make a sale invalid. As always, get your soil tested before you plant a high-value crop. Hemp should be planted or transplanted into a well-prepared seed bed with low weed pressure. If direct seeding, hemp should be planted shallow, paying attention to forecasts. A heavy rain can cause soils to crust and significantly reduce seed vigor. Time to plant will vary on year, location, and variety, but typical planting season is expected to begin around late May, with transplants going in as late as early July and still showing to produce productive fields. Whether you are planting from seed or transplants, it is important to plan ahead regarding target population and row spacing, which are extremely variable. Row spacing typically ranges from about 3 to 6 feet, with plant populations ranging from 1 to 3,000 plants per acre. Research has shown out of North Carolina State University that as you increase plant spacing, individual plant yield will increase. In addition, preliminary studies show that delaying planting well into the season resulted in decreased yields. Now, neither of these results are typically surprising, but it's nice to see some concrete evidence illustrating these impacts, even if they're not coming from Illinois. So again, it's important to think about when we're planting these and how we're planting them, because the row spacing and when we plant is ultimately going to impact morphology and final yield of these plants. Despite the fact that hemp is typically considered a specialized crop, we saw quite a bit of it direct seeded in 2019. This was a combination of research and farmer ingenuity to make this work. Now, granted, we saw some successes and we saw some tremendous failures when it came to direct seeding, but it can be done. Equipment calibration, field conditions, and seed quality are going to play a tremendous role in getting a good stand. And with seed being so expensive, it will be worth taking the time to prepare. Here's just some information from a John Deere group regarding seeding populations and equipment settings for calibration. I'm not going to go into specifics here, but this will be available for you to view and illustrates the work that is being done in this space, both at the private and public sectors. For the sake of time, I will not delve too much into clonal propagation, but I would like to share some references available to you and briefly discuss what clones are and their differences between clones and seedlings. In essence, a clone is a 6 to 10 inch cutting grown in the process of asexual reproduction to produce exact genetic and phenotypic replicas of their mother plants. Mother plants are simply plants with favorable characteristics which you would like to replicate. Clones retain genetic uniformity and consistent growth and are grown for about 2 to 3 weeks before planted into the field. There is a great production video with Half Moon Hemp focusing specifically on clonal propagation, which you can find on our website under the Grower Spotlight tab. As clones are cuttings taken from healthy, desirable mother plants, transplants are started from seed indoors or in a greenhouse before going out into the field. Importantly, clones do not develop taproots and only develop lateral roots. While taproots are more suited to grow straight down and penetrate deeper water and soil, lateral roots allow more adequate nutrient uptake and seeding into the soil. Naturally, there will be trade-offs to clones versus transplants in terms of cost and quality, and that will be something the grower will have to consider personally. Unfortunately, we do not have any updates on fertility requirements for hemp, and the only information I can share are the recommendations for grain and fiber from the University of Kentucky. Now, granted, we can't necessarily make inferences into cannabinoid production, but many growers used this as a baseline in 2019 and were happy with the results. As always, experimentation and testing is encouraged to determine what's going to fit in your production system. There has been some discussions regarding foliar fertilization versus fertigation as it pertains to disease and floral quality at the end of the season. The most valuable portions of the plant, the flower, are susceptible to insect and disease pressure, so reducing conditions which favored those pathogens, such as keeping the flower material dry, is of interest. We will touch more on that shortly. I think by now we're quite familiar with the growth stages of the hemp plant, with planting or transplanting occurring in June, followed by a slow vegetative growth stage where weed control is of primary importance. There is then a period of rapid growth which leads into flowering and reproduction. Note here at the internode there is a pre-flower which is signaling flowering will be upon us soon. Flowering structures will occur at each node, and we can see the branching morphology of the plant as it grows throughout vegetative stages. We then move into a reproductive phase, which occurs sometime in August, where sexual expression occurs, and we are then able to distinguish between male and female plants. It is at this point which, if you see any males in the field, you will want to call them and get them out of there as soon as possible. This is a reminder that any pollination of a female plant will limit its cannabinoid production and promote seed production. It is upon flowering that cannabinoids will begin to accumulate in the flowering material. Again, results from Rock River Laboratory have demonstrated that CBD increases curvilinearly with time, with rapid accumulation of cannabinoids such as CBD occurring later in the season. This may have forced some producers to hold off harvest in an attempt to maximize profitability. In essence, again, the goal will be to maximize production of your cannabinoids of choice while limiting the accumulation of THC to produce a compliant crop. Research out of Utah State University has shown some interesting results regarding the production and then degradation of the cannabinoids in the plant. What we can see is that throughout the flowering, there is an accumulation of these cannabinoids at different proportions, but ultimately a point at which they begin to decrease in concentration. Now, whether that is due to degradation of these molecules or dilution of concentration remains to be seen. Regardless, what we see is there is going to be an optimum time to harvest these plants for those particular cannabinoids, noting that different cannabinoids will have specific peak harvest times. Here's just a picture of buds developing at each node throughout flowering. These structures will continue to enlarge as they attempt to be pollinated. It is throughout the flowering and bud development period where pest and disease pressures become a concern. Crop diseases can occur at a variety of locations on the hemp plant, ranging from the flower all the way down into the roots. While we have observed some diseases and pests in the past year, it is still too early to determine which are economically significant. When considering plant diseases, it is important to consider the disease triangle, knowing that we must always have three things for a disease to occur: a susceptible host plant, a pathogen, and environmental conditions that favor the host and pathogen to allow disease development. Understanding these principles will help make identification of diseases and pests much easier in the future. The University of Wisconsin-Madison recently released a field-grown hemp insect and pest guide, which is available online. This guide provides visual aids as well as potential solutions for these issues. Additionally, work done by Whitney Crenshaw out of the Colorado State University will provide a fantastic resource in pest and disease management. While these resources may not be directly applicable to Illinois, they may prove to be useful resources for the time being. Here are just a few images of the two big insect and disease issues we had in Northwest Illinois. The Eurasian hemp borer, which will be burrowing into floral structures and causing damage and disease, as well as white mold, which showed up late in the floral development period when cooler and wet conditions favored pathogen development. Again, it's hard to say which of these were economically significant diseases or pests in the state of Illinois. We don't have enough information, but this is certainly something we will be keeping our eye on moving forward. Interestingly, the study done out of Cornell University assessed the impacts of various abiotic and biotic stresses on CBD and THC ratios produced in hemp. Notice this is about ratios and not total yield. The results of this study show that there was no significant difference in CBD to THC ratio produced by hemp plants under various stresses compared to the control. These results were supported by findings from Colorado State University and New West Genetics and suggest that cannabinoid production is heavily dependent on genotype and not environmental factors. Long story short, well-bred, stable genetics produce compliant crops with a high level of desirable cannabinoids, and this is what we really want. When it comes to post-harvest testing, we saw some interesting and quite unnerving things actually from 2019. Again, results from Rock River Laboratory, whose entire presentation is available on our website, showed that samples continually tested significantly above safety thresholds for aerobic plant counts and total mold and yeast counts. As you can see, the safe limits are shown by the orange lines, which had actually to be zoomed in to see. This is of concern for producers looking to sell smokable flower and consumers looking to smoke it. Due to limits on pesticide application, this is one area, again, where cultural practices may be a factor. If we can limit the conditions which are favoring disease, that is the cultural practice we would like to see. Also, this is an area of the industry which is currently not truly being enforced and or regulated, and is something to keep an eye on moving forward. Moving on to heavy metal testing, results showed some samples testing above safety thresholds for lead, arsenic, and cadmium. However, these thresholds are from the California Bureau of Cannabis Control for inhaled medical goods, as we currently do not have thresholds for hemp in Illinois. However, this is of concern and should be something that growers be looking at as they decide on where they're going to plant their fields, because this is something that has been popping up in the news here and there regarding products having to be recalled due to heavy metal contamination. We are nearing maturity in mid-September with these COLAs really showing themselves. This particular plot would have been ready for a harvest at some point in early October in northern Illinois. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about compliance testing. Certificates of analysis are issued and provide proof that your hemp tests below the threshold of 0.3% delta-9 THC in the state of Illinois. The 4 state-approved laboratories are listed on this slide. I would like to point out that you are allowed to send samples out of state for analysis, but keep in mind that sample collection, preparation, and analysis may be different from state to state and also lab to lab. The USDA has issued floral sampling guidelines, which can be found by clicking on the image here or at our website. Following the instructions, sampling will be done by taking a portion of the floral material in the top 1/3 portion of the plant, including leaf, stem, and bud material. While the USDA rules may be referenced, each state operating under their own pilot program will likely have their own procedure in place. Once you have received a certificate of analysis stating that you have a compliant crop, you are allowed to harvest it from the field. We saw a variety of harvest methods depending on production system in place. These photos, courtesy of American Hemp Research out of Roseville, show them harvesting some plants by hand using a chainsaw and loaded on the back of a trailer to be hauled for drying. We also saw hemp get harvested using a variety of machinery, including rotary heads or stripper heads. A rotary head is actually seen in the picture on the left, where the biomass was then harvested from the combine and transferred to a wagon, where the air was forced on it to get it down to acceptable moisture. Long story short, there was a bunch of different ways to harvest this crop and just as many ways to get it down to acceptable moisture. Regardless of how you harvest it, though, the hemp will need to be dried quickly and efficiently to prevent spoiling. Whole plants, when harvested, typically come in above 70% moisture, and storage recommendations for both storage and processing and extraction are about 10% moisture. It can be difficult to remove that amount of moisture in October in Illinois when it is cool and damp, and in many cases, additional fans and dehumidifiers were brought in to bring that moisture down. A variety of methods were used to store hemp after effectively drying it, including fiber drums, polyurethane bags, and super sacks. Super sacks seem to be the most common amongst growers as they were easily available and efficient for storing and transportation. Polyurethane bags were also an option in some cases. However, concerns over condensation forced producers to dry down material a little more than normal to prevent that from occurring. For the sake of time, I will not talk too much about the process of CBD extraction, but I would like to bring up your attention to a very important new policy in Illinois regarding hemp and hemp derivatives in medical and adult use cannabis products. Recently, the Illinois Department of Agriculture released notifications enabling cannabis cultivation centers to use industrial hemp as an ingredient in cannabis-infused products offered for sale at licensed dispensaries in Illinois. Importantly, however, hemp flower may not be sold to dispensaries, as all hemp obtained through this policy must be used in extracted form and only in infused cannabis products. This is a new supply chain, and while there are some kinks to be worked out, it is a progressive move by the state of Illinois. The Illinois pilot program, which states that you are responsible to purchase, grow, process, and sell materials which test below 0.3% delta-9 THC, will expire on October 31st, 2020. At that time, the state of Illinois will adopt the USDA regulations for industrial hemp production pertaining to total THC concentration. There has been growing concern from producers regarding what will happen to their product once the pilot program rules expire, what happens to the product which passes the state pilot rules, but no longer passes the USDA regulations. It is believed that the material grown under the 2018 and 2019 Illinois pilot programs would be labeled as an intermediate product available for extraction. However, this will be addressed officially by the Illinois Department of Agriculture in due time, so please keep an eye out for that announcement. As many of you know, the University of Wisconsin put out a great tool for growers to use last season looking at THC and CBD accumulation in various cultivars. You can filter out data by cultivar, location, irrigation, etc. And you can use and see some of that data actually here. After getting together with some other researchers, we decided we wanted to give this a try at the regional level. So in 2020, research projects conducted at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Michigan State University, Purdue University, and the University of Illinois will follow similar sampling and data collection protocols. The goal will be for us to be able to combine data and provide more information at the regional level. We will be looking for grower cooperators to participate in this project to assess variety performance with regards to harvest compliance, cannabinoid production, and plant yield. And we will also be looking at other factors, including irrigation, row spacing, and planting population. The benefits of participating in this project is the wide level of data sharing that will be available, and also the significantly discounted cannabinoid testing, courtesy of our partnership with Rock River Labs. If you are interested, please contact me as soon as possible to see if this will be a good fit. That is all I have for now. Please note that QR code at the bottom of the screen. That is a needs-based assessment that will be very helpful in guiding our research plans moving forward. I encourage you to click on it and take a few minutes to fill it out at your leisure. All the resources discussed here today are available at our website at Go.Illinois.edu/hemp. And if you're looking for the specific videos or the Grower Spotlight, just click on the Grower Spotlight tab and all of them will be right there. Also, I'd like to point out, outside of the University of Illinois Extension, there are several organizations who are here to help you. The Illinois Hemp Growers Association, led by Rachel Berry and Chris Berry, and also the Illinois Stewardship Alliance with assistance from Liz Ruppel, are tremendous resources who have been instrumental in getting hemp going in Illinois. Reach out to them and join their groups to gain valuable insight and access to networks across the state. At this time, I would be glad to answer any questions you may have. You can either ask them now in the chat box, or you can reach out to me via phone or email at any time in the future. Thank you so much.
Stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires an adjustment or response. Everyone, even children, experience stress. However, we don't all respond to or cope with stress in the same ways. Hi, I'm Josie Rudolphi, an extension specialist with the University of Illinois. In today's Moment for Mental Health, I'm going to describe healthy ways or coping strategies you can implement in your daily life to alleviate stress. Think of a time when you were feeling really stressed. What did you do to relax or decompress? Coping usually involves adjusting to or tolerating negative events or realities, while also attempting to maintain your positive self-image and emotional equilibrium. There are healthy and unhealthy ways to cope with stress. Today, I'm going to recommend 4 science-backed methods to alleviate stress in a healthy manner. The acronym is HERD, which stands for Hobbies, Exercise, Relaxation, and Diversion. H is for hobbies. Hobbies bring a sense of fun and freedom to life and can help minimize the impact of chronic stress. For example, those who feel overwhelmed at work can benefit from hobbies because they provide an outlet for stress and something to look forward to after a hard day or week at a stressful job. Examples of hobbies include restoring farm equipment, gardening, or woodworking. E is for exercise. Virtually any form of exercise, from jogging to aerobics to yoga, can act as a stress reliever. The mental and physical health benefits of exercise are undeniable. Increasing your heart rate above resting for as little as 20 minutes can improve your mood. Walking is often described as meditation in motion, an opportunity to reflect, think, or simply zone out. As a reminder, please practice safety when exercising alone or at night, and consult your doctor before starting a rigorous exercise program. R is for relaxation. Many of us assume relaxation is flopping down in front of the couch. But to reduce stress, relaxation techniques should focus on slowing your breathing and your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure, and bringing your body and mind into balance. There are a number of smartphone applications and books that can guide individuals through relaxation techniques such as deep breathing or meditation. Finally, D is for diversions. Diversion is really just another word for distraction. Diversions are useful because they distract your brain from imposing stress. Sometimes you just need to step away and focus on something else. Examples of diversions include watching TV, scrolling social media, switching tasks at your job, or calling a friend or family member to talk about anything besides what might be stressing you out. Today we discussed 4 coping strategies to help alleviate the effect of stress. The next time you experience stress, I encourage you to implement one of the healthy coping mechanisms we discussed today. And we hope you join Illinois Extension again soon for another Moment for Mental Health.
Okay, we will go ahead and start going through, first we'll go through the questions in the chat box. And again, feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to clarify your question, or if you have any questions that you just can't put into words in a chat box and would rather just ask with your voice. So, so Phillip is here. We're gonna start with the first question here. Is there any research on growing hemp hydroponically? Phillip, are you there? Phillip? I hope we're not having some technical difficulties.
How about now?
Yep, we can hear
Sorry
you now.
about that. I muted one thing and not the other. So Robin, that's a great question regarding hydroponic hemp. I'm not aware of any research that's currently being done simply because a lot of these programs are just getting underway. From my understanding, this plant will grow in conditions very similar to tomatoes. So I think, if anything, looking at that type of production might be beneficial in getting started until research is underway, but currently not a lot of information, at least at the university level in the states that I'm aware of. There are also some private companies and instructional videos that might be available in training schools. But again, as far as university research, I just don't think we're there yet. But from what I hear, tomatoes is kind of the most, the equivalent. So that might be a good place to start.
Thanks, Phillip. Next question from Scott. By any chance, will Extension be providing a tool on what average input costs occur when harvesting hemp?
Scott, that's a very good point. we're not there yet, but it's certainly something that's on our mind for this growing season. I will be working with several growers pretty extensively on trying to gather as much of this information as possible. The issue is there's so many factors that go into production, whether it's if you're doing hand harvest, if you're going to be doing wet or dry trimming. So there's a lot of factors, but a long story short, that's certainly on our radar and something I'm going to be looking at this growing season. If folks are interested in participating in something like that and would like to talk with me about it, I would be glad to get more data to maybe put a budget tool together.
Thank you, Phillip. The next question here, we have kind of maybe two-part questions or two questions in one from Augie. What are the projects looking, are there projects looking at crop protection products on mold level, stand, and yield of hemp? So we'll have you tackle that question first, and then we'll go address the second question here from Augie.
Augie, could you maybe clarify, are there projects looking at crop protection projects? Are you talking about things like pesticides, applications, and things of that nature?
Yeah, sorry, I just meant products, fungicides, seed treatments, insecticides.
Sure. So right now, we don't have any labeled for hemp in the state of Illinois. There's been some confusion regarding hemp pesticides, insecticides because of the list of products available for the compassionate use of cannabis. So in the dispensaries, when they're getting their cannabis from the cultivation centers. However, to the best of my knowledge, that has not been applied to hemp. And so we don't really have any products necessarily approved under the state program, even though there are some under the USDA rules. We don't have any plans, to the best of my knowledge, of the 2020 season in Illinois, but I believe that's going to be looked at some of the other universities. It's just, it's a tricky thing because these products are going to be applied likely during the vegetative stage only and not during flowering. And so that's a lot of the times where these issues are occurring later on in the season, particularly when it comes to diseases, from what we've seen. So not to my knowledge do we have any projects underway at the state of Illinois for mold, but that's something that is going to be looked at other places. As far as projects looking at stand and yield of hemp, that's going to take some time because we are just getting a grasp on which varieties are being grown and where. And so hopefully we'll have some more information on yield of particular plants on a per acre basis at the end of the season. And then the second question, where do acres go from here? Are growers finding profitable markets for their crops? That really depends. It's all over the place. In many cases, the products are still being held onto by growers from last year and maybe even from previous seasons. That is due to a variety of issues, from transportation, quality of their product, and just kind of figuring out how we actually want to grow this crop into a harvestable crop for extraction. I would say, in my personal opinion, I would think acres are going to be decreasing in many cases for growers who are trying to do something just a little bit different, but not have a substantial amount of production.
All right, thanks, Phillip. Our next question in the chat here, if insects infect the hemp, can normal pesticides be used to eradicate the insects?
I'm not quite sure if I can answer that truthfully and without giving you a poor answer there, simply because again, we don't have any pesticides labeled, and even if we did, we don't have any research to suggest which of them should be applied, when they should be applied, and if it's a cost-effective strategy. As I said too, a lot of these, if I had to guess, a lot of these applications will be limited to prior to flowering, which is when a lot of issues with bud quality, disease are going to occur. So that's a really good question. We're just still too early to really know what the pesticide and insecticide and herbicides are going to look like in hemp. And
All right.
I do see another question here from Scott, just kind of hiding up there. What is the average cost for labor and time to cut? Okay, I'm sorry. That was from the previous question.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, that was an example, so I skipped over that one. But if Scott has any clarification questions on what you addressed for his question, he's welcome To chip in, we'll go ahead and move on to, oh wait, I see Scott unmuted himself. Scott, go ahead.
No, he answered the questions very well.
Okay, awesome.
We'll look for the research.
All right. And now we have a question in the chat from Peggy. How many acres do you think that the U.S. will produce of hemp this year?
Oh gosh, that's a very tough question. I don't know if I can give you a straight answer, Peggy, because we're going to see a lot of other states get involved in hemp in 2020 and moving forward as well. But there's so many factors, right? You know, I mean, what was the experience of Illinois growers? What was the experience of growers in the region? And are those acres going to be decreasing or increasing total? And then we talk about all the other states. So as a total production from the U.S., I can't really say. You know, and even making inferences, to be honest, about 2020 in Illinois is going to be very difficult. I think we're going to have quite a bit of growers, if not the same amount roughly that we did last year, just personal opinion, because of many of the licenses that may have been carried over from the previous year, and maybe they're scaling back their production or maybe even scaling up in some cases if it fits. So long story short, I don't really have an answer for you, Peggy. It's just going to be another case of let's wait till October, November and see what happens.
All right. Any other here's okay. Thanks, Peggy. Any other questions? Again, feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions with your voice. Here's another question in the chat from Augie. What crop rotations are growers incorporating hemp into?
Great question. Just by necessity and the type of production we do here, you know, corn and soybeans, to be honest, trying to find ways to just incorporate it into existing fields that they have. Maybe they're incorporating a cover crop. I think oats have been one that have been popped up quite a bit just from general conversations this year, and growers looking to try to find an alternative weed control strategy, something that they can, you know, terminate without herbicide strategies later on in the season. Because right around now is when you might be rolling or crimping some of those crops, and that might be a time for you to plant or transplant the hemp into it. So your typical corn, soybean rotations, and then incorporating some type of cover crop is primarily what I have been seeing, although there have been some who are using CRP lands or pasture land, using some type of sod buster to use that, and then to plant into that field and using the pasture as a form of weed control, actually via mowing. So that's just some of the things that we're seeing across the state.
All right, are there any more questions out there before we wrap up?
Just one more point one more point related to Augie's question. You know, this is something where we are seeing a lot of diseases show up late in the season, a lot of molds, things like botrytis or gray mold, and then white mold, which is a problem in soybeans in some areas of the state when we get those wetter, cooler conditions late in the season. So avoiding planting hemp after a crop with susceptible disease, or especially in a field with a history of disease, would be very important.
All right, Peggy, was that you? You said you have one?
It was. I just was wondering if the state is going to limit the number of licensing that's going to occur to those people that already have a license.
To the best of my knowledge, they have no intention of doing that. I think as this is an emerging industry, they don't want to, for lack of a better term, handcuff growers from trying new things and new markets from expanding. So I don't see any intention to limit the production acres. I also don't see any intention of limiting the type of hemp you can grow in specific areas. They're going to just let things kind of play out, I believe, and see which areas of the state show interest and which do not. But again, no intention to limit acres or applications anytime in the future.
All right, last chance for questions before we wrap up. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank you all for attending this webinar. Be on the lookout for an email from me containing an evaluation, as well as the hemp needs assessment that we are conducting. If you take the time to fill out the brief evaluation for the webinar, you will have the option to obtain the slides from this webinar. So we really encourage you to take the 3 to 5 minutes to fill out the evaluation. And once more, we thank you for your interest and attendance and hope you have a great day.